I disagree with my father about a whole bunch of things,
yep.
and some that I agree. But he was an adult. At the end of the day, he was a grown-up.
But Ron, I've said this, and listen, I don't have a Reagan. I just have someone that lost the worst landslide. But but I said the same thing, that this is not my dad and Goldwater's party anymore. No. And I don't think it's Reagan. I mean, you look at the Tea Party. Your dad gave amnesty to how many illegal immigrants? Like, your dad, raised taxes how many times? Because he was a pragmatist. And, Barry Goldwater, my dad's running mate, was the first one on this floor of the Senate in the 80s that said about gays in the military, you don't have to be straight, you just have to shoot straight. Yeah. And the Republicans are still arguing against that today. I mean, this is not Ronald Reagan's Republican Party. It's not my dad and Goldwater's party.
There's an ugliness at times in some of the Republican Party, and I understand what you said about, you can make coalitions with some of these people on issues of war and peace, but there is a strain of ugliness out there. For instance, in Alabama now, and you guys are doing a daily show, so you're probably more up on this than I am. I don't know if they passed the law or if it's just, on the way. There's going to be a new law, an anti-immigration law in Alabama, or at least they're trying to do that would make it illegal, would make you subject to arrest if you drove an illegal immigrant, wait for it, to the hospital. They are criminalizing the Good Samaritan in all of us. They're criminalizing ethics and morality.
That's the enabling act.
What person shouldn't drive if Osama bin Laden was laying in the middle of the street and I came upon him and he was bleeding to death, I might hate him, I might think he's a horror, I would take him to the hospital. Why? Because I'm a human being. And to criminalize that kind of behavior says something very disturbing about the people who would pass that sort of legislation.
Ron, I think that law passed in Alabama. We have one in Georgia now, and this is just a delicious irony to me. We passed, or not we, the Georgia legislature and the governor signed it. They're all Republicans now. They passed a bill that is even stricter, it's my understanding, than the one in Arizona regarding immigrants. What is an unintended consequence? We have farmers in South Georgia now who have no labor to pick their crops. They're rotting in the field. People are now behind on their mortgage payments. And a lot of these farmers who voted in favor of this because they're good, hardcore Southern white Republicans are now standing, like Randy said about the unions. These farmers are standing and saying, what the hell happened? Mm-hmm. We didn't know we did this. Mm-hmm. But that's and you want to say to them, well, then, goddamn it, pay attention to the people that you're electing. So we're going to have bankruptcies. And Willie Nelson's about ready to do Farm Aid again. And I'm just thinking about all these farmers in South Georgia now who are going to lose their farms because they supported people who voted this way, who took away all their labor. And the irony, if it were not for the fact that there's going to be some real suffering among these people, the irony is almost too delicious for words.
But that's what has to happen, unfortunately, with that population, okay? You guys are active, you're here, right? But until you get into some people's pocketbooks, it doesn't make any sense to them. They don't pay attention. They don't care. Yeah. The second it gets into their pocketbook, all of a sudden they're wide awake. Right. So that's why you're seeing cops and firefighters and farmers. Right. All these people that aren't traditionally Democrat, all of a sudden they're like, tell me more.
No, but I mean, Randy, it's like this debt ceiling thing.
I feel like I'm doing Marcus Bachman's job, though. Like I'm converting them to,
But I mean, it's like people joking about the debt ceiling. Like, oh, it's not a real deadline. Really? Do some of you have a mortgage? I have a mortgage. My interest rate's going to go up next week if they default on the debt ceiling. Too. I mean, it's,
There you go again.
Yeah.
There you go again.
Keep working on it.
It's still trickling down on me.
But jokes aside, I worked for a very Democratic congressman in the late 70s and early 80s, a fellow named Ted Weiss, who I think predated you, Dennis, but very much, he and Ron Dellums, Ted Weiss and Ron Dellums were the most Democratic congressmen in those days. And I started working for Ted at the end of Jimmy Carter, and I stopped working for him in the middle of your dad's first term. And I asked him, kind of towards the end of my time with him when I was going to go to Los Angeles and go to law school, I said, how much damage has Ronald Reagan really done? And he said, Norm, what you're not hearing is even worse than what you are hearing. The damage that is being inflicted on the agency level, on the administrative law judge level, on the rulemaking level, the damage being done to America is really monstrous. That was 1982. Here we are now, all these years later, and look at what has happened to our country. And unless we take it back, it ain't happening. We are the people we've been waiting for, and that's the bottom line.
You know, Norm, part of the problem is...
Thank you. You haven't even seen my flag yet.
Part of the problem is we get focused on, I listen to you talk, it's perfect for this discussion, and that is we get focused on the headlines above the fold. We focus on the headlines above the fold. And what's happened to us is Karl Rove, I don't know if any of you saw this article that Rove, was it the New Yorker, I think, interviewed Karl Rove. And Karl Rove had, in a very candid discussion, talked about what it is that he has to do in this country to change the face of democracy. He said, one thing I have to do is I have to destroy the labor movement. He didn't say it, I mean, those weren't his words, but that's the distilled words. The second thing is I have to destroy the justice system, because if I destroy the justice system, it has many meanings. And the other thing is that, and if you read what he says, I have to create fear. And he's done all of those things. We for example, you pay attention to your legislative races. And that seems so important to you, doesn't it? And it is important. But what you miss is everything your legislator gives you can be taken away by the appellate courts and the Supreme Court. And what Karl Rove was talking about, he had to gain control of the courts the same way he did in Texas, was he knew that he could get a Clarence Thomas or Alito or Roberts. He knew he could get these people, Scalia, to nullify everything we try to do. If you remember, FDR faced the same thing. FDR said, if you do this, then I'm going to add to the number of the Supreme Court to back him up. But the point being, the issues that are so essential, we miss because we're reading above the fold. You see,
you remember what they did to the Justice Department. I know you do. Remember that little, first of all, this is when you had all these Christian law schools. Regent University and Oral Roberts started an unaccredited law school. They also
Marcus Bachman liked Oral, didn't he?
And remember,
he went to Oral, didn't he? Oh no, his wife did. I'm sorry. She did. She went to Oral.
Yes.
He recommended Oral for her.
She
Oral Roberts.
I knew there was a joke in there. I wanted you to get it out. So, remember that little girl, Monica Goodling? She was a Regent University grad.
Yes.
And
of course.
Senator Levin was deposing her, and she said, well, I took an oath to the president. And he said, you took an oath to the Constitution, you mean?
Yeah.
And she was like, yeah.
something like that.
Well, you know, little changes like that in the law are called the Enabling Act, and that's what Hitler did in Germany. And I know you're not supposed to say the H word, so now I call him Voldemort, because it's the name that can't be said on radio for some reason, or at least by me. So, yeah, but that's what they did. They started packing the Justice Department. Remember that whole thing? Now, that was one of those scandals that's so big and so that people just tune out. But it's so important because they went into the justice system and they took out all these attorneys general who you now know are there to bring charges against people like Rupert Murdoch, to go police Wall Street, to go do these things. And they went in there and they took out these career people and put in, you know, Regent University graduates, and, you know, Michelle Bachmann went to a law school that, I don't know what its name was when she went. I mean, it had no, it was like...
And it's out of business now.
Hey, Randy,
went to Oral Roberts, the one, but it was before it was Oral Roberts. It was called something else.
Randy, follow up on your story real quick, just the idea of the power of these things that we don't pay attention to. You realize the U.S. attorney that's working on the Murdoch show.
There you go.
The Murdoch case. I don't know if you know this story. But he is like best buddies with little Murdoch.
James.
Did you know that? Yeah, he's the guy who has to determine, do we have a grand jury on this issue? But that's how these things tie together. And the point is, how do we keep up with it? I mean, we have to, but it's so difficult to keep up. So you'll read the paper one day, and you know there were no charges, and you'll never understand. I think his name is Bahara, something like Bahara, and so he's the U.S. attorney. He is best friends with Den.
Viet Dinh.
Viet Dinh, and all of them are best friends with James Murdoch.
See, now the reason why the story it needs to be made simpler is because
interesting.
there's too many names and there's too many
Right.
people
Yeah.
to play. But it's really simple. It has to do with owning too much media and what it does to us as a people. It makes us stupid. It's propaganda. Everyone knows that's the preferred method of every third world dictatorship. In fact, Berlusconi in Italy, you know how much media that guy owns? All of it.
Yeah.
All of it. You've got
And, and you know,
all
all
of
you need
it.
to know is
In
that
Australia,
the
Rupert
owner,
Murdoch
the
owns
primary owner of Fox News is a Saudi,
70%
right?
of the media.
Yeah.
He's a
Owns
Saudi.
7%.
Right, as Tom
Yeah, and the
Brokaw
second
would
largest
say,
shareholder
all.
is
we
the
just-
Saudis.
Let me take a moment to just express not sympathy for Rupert Murdoch, but just make an observation about poor old Rupert, you know? It's the most
I love his
humble
wife.
day of his
I
life.
love that woman.
Everybody shut up while I say it's the most humble day of my life.
But not.
But wait a minute, Rupert
Humble enough
Murdoch,
for you to not
but not humble.
interrupt.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly. No responsibility there. No. Rupert Murdoch at 80 years old. Imagine being 80 years old. Some of you can probably imagine it very well. You're 80 years old, and you're looking back at your life now, and you discover that you are perched high atop a giant empire of that your entire life is
You're on
just
the porta potty
empty.
of media.
You are nothing. You may have done all these. You may have gone in the back door at 10 Downing. You may have lots of money. You're nothing now. You look back at your life, and it's a big zero.
And that's your legacy.
You created. Yes,
That's
your
your
legacy is. Sorry, Molly. Yes.
Before we lose the Congressman, I want to get to this question, which is a variation that will be familiar to those who've been here in years past, which is, you know, people don't really disagree about what the problem is, but they're always looking for answers about what to do. This is from Susan Schaefer in Squim. She says she had a ticket to the forum. Are you here, Susan? Yay! All right, thanks for coming. And this is so I'll let her say it. Most of us here have an awareness of the issues and problems and understood what should be done to fix them. The problem is there's so much money out there fighting progressive solutions that we feel helpless, even in the voting booth. So what can we do in the next election cycle to fight the flood of corporate money and, worse, the privatized corporate control of the actual voting process? And let's start with the Congressman. Let's let everyone talk on it.
You know, when I broke into politics many years ago, the way that I did it was going door to door. And I campaigned door to door in every office that I've ever held, which includes city council, clerk of courts, mayor of Cleveland, state senator, and U.S. congressman. And what I find is that, particularly in this society, which is so heavily mediated, in a society where people, you know, famously have gone bowling alone, where they, you know, go and you know, there's even drive-in funeral homes where somebody can sign the book and just keep going.